Hello, everyone. This is Matt, your Chaotic and Writer. Thank you very much for tuning into tonight's stream. That's not supposed to happen. I told you to mute. Anyways, hello. Welcome. It has been maybe a couple weeks, but we are back with a World Building Wednesday stream with the focus on pocket dimensions, social etiquette, and answering some our world building questions. But on top of that, we are going to be taking a look at Project Aurora mini project lore, because there are some continuing developments in that arena. But I also should mention that it has been solidified that this Sunday, after Secrets in the Sands, specifically after Sensei Suplex's game of Secrets in the Sands, we will have a roundtable discussion with a handful of lore masters from Project Aurora. I'm going to adjust my let me know if the audio sounds good. But anyways, yes, this is going to occur on Wednesday. Sorry. This is going to occur on Sunday, and Sunday is going to be very interesting. We are going to have the likes of Sarcastic Druid. We are going to have the likes of, I got to get the full list. One sec. Sarcastic Druid, an individual known as Death Gauge, an individual known as Deniable Assets, an individual known as Elderberry, and along with myself and Maxfish, the lore master leader of the mini project. So that is very exciting. I'm going to have a lot of fun sort of running that discussion and going through, some of those updates and asking them questions about their world building processes, their thoughts upon the current setting. That is to say, Green Tides and Clockwork Skies, on top of getting a full discussion about the specifics of the lore, and maybe having some brainstorming. Brainstorming is always fun thing to do on these streams, and I want to make sure that I bring that content to you in real time. Before we actually progress over to our topic, I do want to just say thank you very much for popping in. Hello, Panda Chen. Hello, everybody else out there. And in the meantime, let me switch over. Gotta do my quick plug here. But I'm gonna do, I'm gonna do my plug later. I'm not gonna do that plug. I'm gonna do a different plug. So actually, no, I'm going to do this plug. Sorry. Yes. So I do have a Patreon, and the Patreon is mainly to cover some of the expenses of running the stream, and to cover some of the expenses of, like, say, the Chaotic and Writer website, and also to be a way to provide back to those who support the stream, who support the endeavors of Chaotic and Writer website, or any of the other work that I do. Also, it's an opportunity for me to put together and cater one-shots to those who are interested in participating in them as a reward for them fighting back. If you have any questions about some of those benefits, look down in the doobly-doo. There's a link to Patreon, and you can certainly check those out and consider subscribing, my friends. Also, I do want to mention that this stream, or that is to say, this stream in particular, while it is a channel and stream unto itself, there is a website that I do run. It's called www.chaoticandwriter.com. Periodically, I will post up new articles, new resources, new random name generators. That's sort of my thing as well. So if you have a few moments, feel free to, once again, doobly-doo or link down over there and check out the website. It looks a little different from the way it does right now because this is the old template and I have a new template now. So if you're interested in what the new template looks like, you could always click on that link. Finally, I do want to mention that there is the sheer potential for more upcoming Dungeons and Dragons one-shots that I plan on running. And, I put together a list, but, I'm not quite sure which one that I want to run precisely. It's just sort of, wait, do you guys hear that? Is it true? Are they back? That's right. The Bears are back in town. I was lying. I know exactly what one shot I'm going to be running. It is the Honey Heist one shot. It's going to be coming live at some point in May. And it is going to be extremely fun. If you've never played Honey Heist, it is a blast. The premise of Honey Heist is you are about to embark upon a heist of HoneyCon 2022. Only there's two things. You have a masterful criminal plan that requires precise timing, and you are a goddamn bear. So, if this is something that you would be interested in, please feel free to reach out to me. But of course, if you are a patron, you get first chance to become part of this fantastic and fun one shot. So, once again, doobly doo, check it out. And obviously I had to use an 8-bit rendering because there's no way that music is not already copyrighted. Okay, so back to the center. Hello, Madra. Good to see you, bud. I've been very busy this week. Very, very busy. There's all sorts of really interesting things happening in the pipeline. Of course, I'm also doing lots of prep for tomorrow's session of Tales of Silesia, which, broadcasts at 6:30 Eastern, 5:30 Central, if you want to check that out as well. But good to see you, Madra. Good to see you, Panda Chin. And yeah, I mean, there's no time like the present. I want to dig right into our next and ultimately our first point of discussion. Oh, look. Oh, actually, it came up correctly. Good. I want to talk about pocket dimensions. I do want to make sure that okay. So chat is working on the side there. Cool. It is really tiny, though. I should adjust that really quick. But in the meantime, that is the third time, Panda, that you've said hi today. I appreciate you're very excited to be here. Let's see. On the left chat. That's what I want. I want the chat box to be bigger. Oh, it's a little too big. Oh, jeez. Oh, jeez. Well, what do you know? Oh no. Well, this is what I get for trying to adjust things live. Okay, cool. We're just gonna do that. Oh, stop that. I'm having all sorts of fun trying to get very basic things to work right now. Okay, well. Beans. Okay, that's the closest we're going to get it. Okay, sweet. So, pocket dimensions. Let's talk about them because there's a bunch of things about pocket dimensions that, of course, we understand the general concept of what a pocket dimension is, but on the high level, we need to understand more about what is a pocket dimension. and how they are used. A pocket dimension. It looks, yes, it does look a bit compressed. It is absolutely compressed. And for one reason or another, it does not seem to want to allow me to adjust. Okay, there we are. I don't know why it keeps selecting that. That's so weird. Let's not worry about it. Anyways, a pocket dimension. What we call a pocket dimension is basically a parallel universe unto itself, but it is it's much smaller than a typical universe. It is by its definition, a pocket universe. There's all sorts of examples of what a pocket dimension is. Probably the most prolific version of a pocket dimension would be Narnia from Chronicles of Narnia. You literally enter into a house, you open up the wardrobe, you enter in past all the coats, and you enter on the other side in a snowy land that is unto itself a very different and very strange place. But it doesn't necessarily need to have all sorts of content within it. People would also equate things like the Upside Down from Stranger Things as a pocket dimension. I don't know if I would necessarily say that. That's more of a plane of existence. A pocket dimension, however, they are amazing tools for those that are powerful enough to create them and to wield them, specifically like wizards and extremely powerful interdimensional beings. And so the thing is that being that this is a trope that seems to appear in many different versions of literature and in like tabletop gaming, things of that nature, there are certain things that help define what a pocket dimension is. I think probably one of the best visual representations I've found is this. This is a small diagram. If you can't see it, that's fine. But at the very least, I could potentially make it a lot larger here. There we go. So, this is, I guess this is an infographic on how to create your own universe. If you are ever wondering how to do it. And first, you must concentrate a large amount of mass in a way that distorts the space-time of our universe. If you literally want to think of the universe as some sort of fabric, the general idea with a pocket dimension is that you are pulling away part of that universe and you are separating it off from the rest of it. I guess that is a way that you can create a pocket dimension. And so, as you can see here from the the science, would we call this science? This is more like there's some quantum physics going on here, that's for sure, and we can talk a little bit about that. But as there's this creation of a false vacuum, its connection to the universe of which it came in is narrower and narrower, and you could kind of think of that corridor as a wormhole, or you could think of it as a portal. It is a much smaller opening. It is a much smaller opening that expands to a much larger area. And then eventually that wormhole pinches off and a new baby universe is born. But of course, you still need a way to traverse between one universe and another universe. That could be by way of portal or teleportation, or like a quantum like the quantum realm or something like that. But in general, talking about these baby universes, these little pocket dimensions, teeny tiny, there are some certain things to kind of keep in mind about them. Is that the general idea is that they are separated from the known universe that you and I inhabit. They are isolated. The whole purpose of it is to be isolated from the rest of the universe. For its creator, or those that its creator intends to dwell inside of it, to be completely separated from everything else. And you can think of it in terms of perhaps you have a super powerful creature, super powerful being, a god, who wants to create a world of their own and does not want outside interference to be possible. And so they create a pocket universe so that they can sandbox that world however they see fit. And there's also the prospect of perhaps maybe you are a wizard, and one of your big projects is to create a pocket universe because maybe you're a bibliophile. Maybe that is a trait of yours, and you want to house an amazing, an everlasting library, but you don't want it to be on the corporeal, in the corporeal realm. You want it to be separated. You want it to basically not suffer the fate of the Library of Alexandria. You do not want it to suffer the fate of war, of fire, of disaster, of all sorts of destructive forces, which may ruin the archives that you wish to keep. So if you were such an individual, perhaps a pocket dimension might be the best place for that. A pocket dimension might otherwise be a location where you, as an individual, want to keep somebody else. Perhaps it's a prison. Perhaps you do not want other people prowling around in the pocket dimension. I would honestly equate something like the mirror dimension from Doctor Strange, Professor Strange, from Doctor Strange, as kind of an example of what could be considered a pocket dimension. Essentially what it is a complete distortion of everything that is in corporeal space, bending it and twisting it in every which way. And it is a way of keeping somebody in or traversing from one point to another, which brings up a whole nother aspect that a pocket dimension might be also very useful for fast transport, fast transit. Whereas you could have, a portal going from one spot to another. You could have an area in between. And that area in between could be like customs, or could be just a convenient spot to, convenient spot to have a midway point between one spot or another. And who's to say that a pocket dimension cannot have multiple exits, cannot have multiple ways in and out? However, perhaps you are somebody who is trying to seal away a wizard or a demon lord or an evil god from the rest of the universe. Perhaps a pocket dimension is the best way to keep them locked behind an astral doorway. And so with all of these different uses for a pocket dimension, I think it's good to kind of take a look at some general examples as they exist in media, I think. And I think the most probably the most notable for those that are familiar with Dungeons and Dragons would be the Bag of Holding. The Bag of Holding is basically a pocket dimension. It's a pocket dimension that you carry around in a bag. It is an ingenious item, extremely useful, allows you to store pretty much whatever you want inside of it as long as it fits into the opening. You could expand that to like a chest of holding or a door of holding if you want to carry a door around everywhere, or embed it within a doorknob. You put the doorknob on a specific location, draw the door in chalk, and then you open it, and there's a pocket dimension. I will also say that there have been different ways that I've seen pocket dimensions used in roleplay. Because there used to be a number of different communities I used to roleplay in, and their examples of pocket dimensions were it's just a convenient place to have a tavern, and there's multiple locations that you can enter into the pocket dimension so that you can drink at the tavern. Boom boom. Panda Chen says you were taking notes but you got distracted. That is a-okay. The VOD will stick around for a little bit, using it to make the world better. Fantastic. That is exactly why I run streams like this. They are all sorts of opportunity to do brainstorming, thinking about ways to use certain tropes in fantasy and sci-fi. Draw, unfortunately, says internet fucking up even at 180p. Yikes. I do sincerely apologize. Hope your internet situation gets a little better. Big grin. Let's see. I'm trying to think. What are some other? I'm gonna leave it to chat a little bit if you want to pitch in. What are some other examples of pocket dimensions in pop culture? Because there's a small handful that I mentioned could be considered pocket dimensions, but they are very specific applications for very specific uses. Another reason to use a pocket dimension would be like the same reason somebody in the IT field would create a virtual machine of a computer. It's basically a secluded place to perform operations, building, construction, experimentation, testing of technology or magics or all sorts of different crafts without it taking up space in the actual real world. You could definitely consider that if you had a world that had a real estate market and that real estate market wasn't looking too good, you'd rather have a pocket dimension, right? You'd rather have your own pocket dimension, because are you paying upon that pocket dimension? I mean, is there a monetary structure that charges you for using a pocket dimension? Is it property like everything else? Which brings up a whole other aspect, actually. Imagine a society that is so magically inclined where there are places you can go to rent or buy a pocket dimension, and you're charged by the month. I just created real estate in magocratic society, and I feel ashamed of myself. So, so those are some examples. I've used pocket dimensions in my D&D games. I should move it onward to the next slide. I have used pocket dimensions in my D&D games. I've created, there's a place called the Candletree Tavern in Siglasia, and the Candletree, the Candletree Tavern is a place that has multiple bedrooms, but they're not on the corporeal realm. You can, stay the night in one of these bedrooms in a pocket dimension. And what that does is, let's say, for example, you're trying to avoid the authorities, or you're trying to avoid people trying to kill you. A pocket dimension is a great place for you to just get off the grid for a little bit. And so you have just a place that you sleep and you eat, and you stay there for however long you need to before you come back out. It's also a way of, once again, tricking the authorities. If the authorities come around the Candletree Tavern, Rogar will be like, I don't know what you're talking about. They weren't here. They weren't here at all. On top of that, there is a pocket dimension. What's really funny is I created a pocket in this Candletree Tavern. I created a pocket dimension, which was basically all it went to was this glass room hanging over the elemental plane of water. And it was a bathroom. That's all it was a bathroom. The reason I'm showing this in particular is that this is an artistic rendition of the dungeons, the Forgotten Realms, high level Dungeons and Dragons planes. Now, the reason I bring this up, despite the fact we're talking about pocket dimensions, is because you can have pretty much a pocket dimension come out of pretty much any one of these planes when you truly think about it. But there is this area here considered the border ethereal. And when a pocket dimension is created, it typically inhabits a space that would have otherwise been part of the border ethereal. El Panda Chen says, would time flow different in pocket dimensions? Like, would that be reasonable? I think it would honestly would be reasonable, because our perception of time is based upon very specific things, like very specific things in physics. The vibration rate of matter when it is hot or cold, the closeness or distance from a massive source of gravity. And I would presume that if you're bending the fabric of space-time, you are bending time as well. It could be that the flow of time skirts over the pocket dimension, and so time passes a lot quicker, or time perhaps passes a lot slower. How you would judge that in terms of like whether it passes quicker or passes slower may require a little bit of pseudoscientific jargon. El Panda Chen says, so could the same be done with gravity, since it would be physics? Yeah, absolutely. When I think of a pocket dimension, I think whoever creates the pocket dimension can warp that dimension in pretty much any way they see fit, when you really truly think about it. and that pocket dimension can emulate certain concepts of time, certain concepts of gravity or physics working in a very different way. Because it is, as the previous image denotes here, it is basically a baby universe. That baby universe is it will maybe have the DNA of the universe that it came from, but it could be influenced and grow in a different way. And think of it this way: because it is a smaller, much smaller baby universe compared to the larger universe, I imagine change to those physics would be a lot easier. It would require less magic, less power to do so. If you're already powerful enough to create your own pocket dimension, then you are probably powerful enough to change how space and time functions at the core of one of these tiny baby universes. Kind of moving onward now. I don't know. I have a whole bunch of notes here about about how pocket dimensions are reflected in, like, if you're somebody who really needs like cosmological, astrophysical, pseudoscientific theories to justify a pocket dimension. There is an actual theoretical framework called inflationary theory, and it basically defines a realm, like pocket dimension, defining a realm like the observable universe, but much like the fabric of the universe, like I pointed at before, that fabric is not completely flush. It has bumps, it has irregularities, it twists and turns in so many ways. Imagine you had a universe that had multiple planes of existence. Imagine how many pockets, how many points of inflation on that fabric you need to have in order to have an entire great wheel cosmology like that. And there are mechanisms of inflation, that this inflation does produce these pockets or corners. When you really think about it, it's sort of like a corner of a room. It's a more confined space, but imagine you had the power to stand outside of a room, pinch the corner of the room, and just pull it in a direction, and cut off the tunnel to it. Mechanisms of inflation within undergoing cycles of cosmological evolution or resembling the Galilean Genesis or other emergent universe scenarios. Light cone cut off, casual diamond. Sure, a lot of that is really not fun to talk about. That's a lot of technical jumbo. But another way that you can think of pocket dimensions when you consider it is the same way we look at planets. When you think about it, we have planets in the solar system, and then we have dwarfs, or moons. These are celestial bodies that are smaller than a planet. They do not qualify as planets. So when you're talking about universes versus pocket dimensions, it's sort of a tomato thing. A pocket dimension is basically you could just consider it a small universe. And you would, I would be remiss if I couldn't say that that having my own pocket dimension that is literally just the size of a city block would be pretty cool. And just it would start as a giant storage place, just like a bag of holding. But eventually I would start, creating, building things in there and having a structure that I can go to. And it's just a nice place for me to be secluded, to be away from the rest of the world. And if I ever feel like, hey, I want to go out and experience the world, then boop, I just go through the portal to get back. And that's an introvert's dream when you really think about it. El Panda Chen says, so many possibilities, but science failed that in school. This is fantasy. This is science fiction. We're taking science and we're smashing it on the ground and making fun things out of it. Essentially, that is the power of fantasy. There's also there's other ways to think of it, pocket dimensions too. You can think of it in ways that are kind of invoked in franchises like Star Trek, where imagine you were in a universe which was just a parallel to yours, but it was 1 second off. So things that required precise timing in your universe had mostly failed. Like it was completely different set of circumstances that allow things to go to pan out differently. Or for instance, being out of phase with yourself. And if you are out of phase with yourself, there's essentially two versions of you. And until you combine yourself back together into one, you essentially are you are essentially locked in a pocket dimension. It's kind of maybe the universe's way of securing itself. There's also the thought that if you had your own pocket dimension and the way to leave the pocket dimension was lost or destroyed, I wonder how many pocket dimensions there are out there of rookie wizards who created them and then weren't able to get out. Imagine a graveyard of pocket dimensions. Imagine you stumble upon a pocket dimension and you see a laboratory. You see a laboratory of people working vigorously, and they look to you and they're thinking, and they are gazing up and down at your clothes, and it doesn't seem like they recognize any of the stuff that you're wearing. What's that thing? A cell phone? What's a cell phone? They've been stuck in this pocket dimension for a long, long, long time. Chilling in a pocket space would be fantastic. 100%. El Panda Shin says, oh, you just gave me a really good idea. Well, good. Or if you want to think larger, perhaps you want to have your own settlement or kingdom. Perhaps you are part of a group or a tribe that wanted to exile itself, wanted to escape threats. Perhaps it was gravely misunderstood. Perhaps it was on the brink of oblivion, and so this was a way for them to escape. Imagine all of the kooky societies that could exist within a pocket dimension if it was to completely and utterly sustain for itself and not accept individuals from the outside. Neither leave. There's joy with that isolation, but there's probably terror as well. So for the most part, pocket dimensions are really cool things. I recommend that you use them for your games. I recommend that you use them for your creative writing projects. Overall, I am a huge fan of using them for different things. As I mentioned, that Candletree Tavern that is located in Siglasia is one such location, one such place that is a fantastic that has a fantastic opportunity for one to be secluded from the rest of the universe. So that for the most part is going to wrap up my little chat about pocket dimensions. And soon enough, we're going to be moving over to talking about social etiquette and cultural norms. There are all sorts of there are all sorts of things to talk about when it comes to like the social etiquette and stuff. But I'm going to bring it back. Come on back. It's good to see you. While I'm here, I want to make a couple of adjustments because I realize that I'm presently at followership 277 followers, and for some reason it says 286, which is not true. So we're going to end that. We're going to take it to 277. We're going to just call it new friends. Cool. By the way, this is a fantastic opportunity for me to mention that upon reaching 300, same thing as when I had reached 200 back in November of 2021. In order to celebrate 200 followers on my Twitch stream, I hosted a 12-hour stream, and it was fantastic. It was a great time, a variety stream, doing many different things, doing a little bit of World Building Wednesday stuff, doing running a Dungeons and Dragons game, doing some general chat about Dungeons and Dragons, playing some video games, doing some music production. That was a good time. And I'm thinking that it is time. It has been about 6 months, and we are overdue for another 12-hour stream. Perhaps we have the following and the ability to do a 24-hour stream. It could be possible. But we will see very soon how that pans out. I really want to have the opportunity to bring everybody together for a 12-hour celebration, or 24 hours. Although I think a 24-hour stream would actually be pretty solid because there are many friends to myself and the stream that are from many different places of many different time zones, and that would give everybody an equal share of attention from myself. And so feel free to comment and let me know if that is something that you would be interested in peeking in on in the near future upon reaching that 300. For the most part, I would be down. I'd be ready to go. Panda Chen says, yes, it's here, 2 a.m. So it's like 12 to 24th would be interesting. I agree. It would be a lot easier for everybody because everybody would have an opportunity. In the meantime, I think it's time for us to dig in a little bit to our next section. And that is going to be, as soon as I bring it up here, social etiquette and cultural norms. I want to sidebar that by saying that it took me forever to spell etiquette correctly and to teach myself to spell etiquette correctly every time. Every single person out there has the handful of words that like they've learned how to spell correctly, but they keep misspelling it, or they keep forgetting how to spell it, despite the fact that they've been exposed to it hundreds and hundreds of times. Etiquette is one of those, and one of those words for me. It's part of my anti-lexicon. It's a word that will not remain. And so I really want to I really want to make sure that I get that down every time. So let's take one quick look at something here. Boom. And of course, as I'm going to be discussing some specific topics on social etiquette, I should mention that I will be pulling quite a few pieces of information from the Victorian era in particular, in support and celebration for Green Tides and Clockwork Skies, because it is a steampunk setting. And there are going to be individuals with many different, with the typical Victorian late industrial era stylings. There are going to be cowboys. There's going to be that era in thick, and I want to be able to bring some insight and some interesting anecdotes into the mix. So ultimately, when we're talking about stuff like etiquette, this is something that has been posed as a continuous problem for science fiction and fantasy. Usually people that develop worlds in a fantastical sense, or manage to build out an entire society in science fiction. One of the things that usually is kicked under the rug or is overcooked is the concept of social etiquette and customs. I mean, the thing is that some of those like races and societies are derivative of others that already exist. I mean, you have your elves with the pointy ears, bows, arrows, swords. They worship multiple gods. They're, they hate the culture of humans. And they don't get along with dwarves. There's all of those small tropes in fantasy, and they tend to make their way directly into sci-fi and into other fantasy. This is this is something that sort of just permeates the spectrum of genres that we're talking about here. And if you have an alien race, you imagine, oh, they have blue skin, they have tentacles, they have phasers, they fly in spaceships, they worship, they have ancient sacred texts, they're at war with another alien race. There's a lot going on for each of these examples that are just they're big rocks without the small rocks. They're not getting into the intricate details of what a society does, how it interacts with itself. And so there's a need to kind of think of things on the lowest level. Literally, what do one of these creatures do the moment they wake up? The moment they see one other creature, what do they do? How do they recognize and address family members versus how do they address strangers, versus how they address friends, versus how they address authority, versus usually when you think of etiquette, you think people sitting down at a table and eating food with, where's the fork, where's the spoon, where's the knife. But while that's the first place our minds go towards, it's certainly not the only place that you can pinpoint social etiquette. So let's see here. And just as an example, They're, you know, the run of the mill social etiquette that we can think of is how do we eat food? What is customary for eating food? When eating soup, tilt the spoon away from you. To get the last bit of soup from the bottom of the bowl, you have to tilt the soup plate away from you. And like these are things that we're familiar with, right? If I were to address a professor at college, I would call them Mr. or Mrs. This or that, or I'd call them Doctor this or that, or I'd say yes sir, yes ma'am, yes individual, however it is they want to be addressed. If, for instance, it was a friend of mine, be like, "What's up? How you doing?" You know, I would come on in for a hug. I would, you know, do a fist bump. There's a different way that I am engaging with people I know versus people who are in a knowledgeable authority. So might be good to break down what are the different parts of a culture, because we can't just list them. We have to sort of have a framework, right? And so there is what's known as the culture wheel. And the culture wheel is where one thing helps influence another aspect of culture. And so when you focus upon what is a value that you hold as an individual, what is a value that a community holds, well, those values are intended to make, or mostly intended to make, for what is perceived a greater community. That sense of greater community feeds into the knowledge and stories we tell. Those knowledge and stories that we tell inform language, how we speak with each other. Language informs the traditions and rituals of which we have in our cultures. Those traditions and rituals are, you know, methods that are set in stone that allow us to perform, do things with certain techniques and utilize certain skills. Those techniques and skills therefore inform us on what tools and objects we use. And on top of that, those tools and objects, while practical, are also the center for creating art. Once, you know, in creating art, we've sort of created a sense of hospitality, you know, libations, food and drink. And I'm not sure how food and drink feeds into values. Probably much about the whole food eating etiquette thing. But say, for example, you are trying to work within a culture and you want to come up with, you need to figure out a way to flesh out that culture, to figure out what the cultural norms are. And so the culture wheel is a great tool for that, because you can, you know, come up with a particular idea. You can start at a particular place on the wheel, and you can see how different parts are affected by other parts. And it can provide some idea as to how certain things affect or are affected by the language, or if there is a particular if there's a particular part of society, maybe a part of the part that is agricultural, or a part that is aristocratic, or a part that is militant, they have their own norms amongst amongst themselves. You know, usually agricultural is working with your hands. It's, you know, hard work. It's getting up early in the morning. It's, you know, getting some sun. It's coming in for dinner time by the time the sun has set. There's probably a sense of closeness and sense of family, because they're the individuals that you interact with day in and day out. Because it is rural, there is probably the sense of religiosity that is carried. And then, of course, aristocracy. You have a completely different set of arrangements. Chances are, if you are incredibly rich, you could probably afford to just sleep in until whenever, not have to answer to anybody. But you probably get up early anyways, because you have a number of things that you have to take care of. You are you're performing, you know, negotiation, or you are writing up important treaties or documents, or you're being part of a debate, or you are into philanthropy, or you're a robber baron. Let's be frank. Maybe you're just a robber baron, and you are just trying to find out more ways to make money. While if you were in the military, you would have, once again, very different norms. Complete and absolute utter respect for the authority figures above you. Complete and utter responsibility for the individuals underneath you. You are expected to be prompt. You are expected to be you're expected to follow commands to the T. There is not a sense. It's not predicated in any religiosity. It is predicated very specifically in power. Is predicated in monopoly force, and there are and you can imagine in your mind each of these different examples. These are just archetypes that I generally pulled out of the wind, but you have the visual of what each looks like, and you have that visual because you know what the norms are. You've seen similar in our society or in books or movies, how it's represented, even in fantasy societies. So there is always a basis for taking example from what we know and understand. I'm rambling. So I think it actually would be best for me to actually go to the next part of this, which is talking about let's see here. Okay, so it's talking about social etiquette and norms, but sort of comparing and contrasting these norms between different groups, because not every single group has the same has the same norms. So, for instance, if I were to belch in front of you, you'd probably say nice, or you'd be like, ew. Generally, in places like China and Taiwan and places in the Far East, belching is considered a compliment to the chef as a sign that you have eaten well and enjoyed your meal. There is the idea of the crushing handshake, how a bone-crushing, strong handshake is seen as admirable in certain places in the West, like the UK and United States, but not really in the East, because it's seen as a sign of aggression. Which is another aspect, is what seems like a normal thing to one individual may be a complete faux pas to somebody in a completely different culture. If I were, if in a fantasy sense, if I were a human and I was interacting with elves, elves of a very particular subculture, it could very well be that my extending of a hand to shake another individual's hand could be not a greeting, but an indication of begging. An indication of I will take that now. And so that subculture might find that either offensive or would look down upon you immediately. If what's also interesting is that some of these social norms manifest with technology too. Like bubblegum didn't used to be a thing that was as common. Of course, there was tobacco, there was other ways of chewing, but bubblegum, chewing gum in particular, in certain places of the world, it is considered vulgar to chew. In some places, it's illegal. And that ultimately has come down to, chewing gum. If there was not a thing to chew, that would not be a custom. So it's sort of it was also based upon this reaction to technology, or reaction to new inventions and new things. Boom skis, where are we here? And so one place that I want to zero in on in particular is going to be our steampunk setting of Green Tides and Clockwork Skies. Phoenix B, hello, it's great to see you. And as you can imagine, there's probably going to be some importing of Victorian era cultural norms. Now, I also want to premise something. While we're looking at history, this is a very one-sided. It is a very one-sided representation, and I need to make that abundantly clear. Because if we're talking about Victorian times, we are talking about a mid-colonial era. We are talking about an era that does not treat individuals of other genders and other individuals of other peoples of color very well. But for the sake of our mutual storytelling inclusiveness, essentially anytime that we emulate steampunk, anytime we emulate the Victorian era, or anything that is within that general sphere of fantasy, we are thinking about the rule of cool, and we are thinking about what allows for this better version of us, to manifest. We don't need to pluck directly and religiously from history. We are making this a better, we're essentially making it a better history. So there may be some representation of the whole, well, we'll see here. So for Victorian etiquette, it's stuff like learning to govern yourself, to be gentle and patient, to never speak or act in anger. Remember that valuable as the gift of speech is, silence is often more valuable. And I'm going to stop us there because Green Tides and Clockwork Skies is a Dungeons and Dragons setting, there's going to be a lot of opportunity to completely take these etiquette rules and to break them. I would not necessarily say that these are etiquette rules for adventurers, because I kind of think of adventurers as being like a subculture within the greater culture of the society. I imagine adventurers are kind of seen with a level of utilitarian usefulness and disdain. I don't necessarily know if heroes and adventurers within Green Tides, Clockwork Skies will be heralded in the same fashion. I honestly don't know. But generally speaking, if I'm going to try to represent non-player characters in this setting, I want to try to follow some of these etiquette rules, right? So make sure that people are, that those NPCs are more composed to try to emulate some of that, some of what that society represents. Phoenix V says Jack the Ripper type era. That's exactly the era we're talking about. Learn to speak in a gentle voice. Learn to say kind and pleasant things when opportunity offers. There's no way that D&D characters are going to stick to these rules. The NPCs may try to. Do not neglect little things if they can affect the comfort of others. Learn to deny yourself and prefer others. Beware of meddlers and talebearers. You see, that last one is probably a central reason why I have the theory that in this setting, adventurers are probably not going to be as well liked. It's quite possible. They're probably going to be seen as meddlers and talebearers. I actually like that phrase, meddlers and talebearers. I found this thing, good manners based upon the rules of Children's National Guild of Courtesy. We don't need to go through this. I think we understand specifics. One final thing I want to touch up upon when it comes to social norms and etiquette. What about the rules for circumstances that are not typically calm and sociable? What about the rules for things like war? Even war has its own etiquette, regardless if we want to acknowledge those things or not. In war, there is a sense of honor and dishonor. There is a sense of what an objective should be and how to go about those objectives in ways that are honorable. I do suppose that in a more technologically and socially progressed environment, that there may be this general or better sense of honor versus dishonor. Something that I would like to replicate in my NPCs as well. Phoenix V says, a gentle speaking Orgoth, oh the nightmare. I assume some penalties to those who act dishonorably. I would not deny any characters or players any capability for them to do what it is they feel that their character is most suited to. However, the society around them will pretty much set the tone. And I want to be able to set the tone to my players personally. Panda Shen says, I have to leave. Have fun. Well, thank you very much. And I hope you have a fantastic night. And so when we're talking about the rules of war, when we're talking about what is etiquette on the battlefield, there are all sorts of different ways that you can break this down, but the thing is that around the height of colonial warring between European powers, there was an establishment of sort of this idea of what an honorable war was. If I were to pull directly from like George Washington, he actually had 5 rules for what an honorable war was. The first one is don't assume you are welcome. That is to say, if you are a military and you have successfully taken over a location, the honorable thing would to be, let's say, for example, if any of the individuals from the Sky City decide to appropriate or take over a certain settlement or colony from the ground, they may have, if they are doing so of any sort of honorable sense, they may have a sense where they don't quarter, like they don't do dishonorable things. They don't decide to quarter themselves inside of other people's houses and be like, well, this is mine now. They don't take things away from individuals in the settlement, and they don't try to defile the the cultural norms of the place that they just walked in on. They do not presume over them in that fashion. This is just a strategic objective for them. And while there may be some administration change, this is not something that needs to be part of a complete takeover of culture. But of course, as we know from history, that is not the case typically. So that part of honor will probably be thrown out the window by a lot of people over time. A lot of big powers over time. The second rule is cultivating local support. Not being a dick to the citizens of the opposition is important. Rule 3 is respect local religious practices. See, this all kind of comes into the same idea where do not put your foot down on your opponent if they are not fighting. Allow them the capability to recite in their own way, however they see fit. Rule 4 is don't abuse prisoners. That should be universal, but that seems to happen in war a whole lot. But it is dishonorable. I'm sure that there are going to be some paladins in this army that are going to greatly frown any torture, any cruelty, and so that is something to consider with the Clockwork Skies portion of this. Phoenix Beast says, like my good days of Age of Empires, where I would wall in enemy citizens so they couldn't escape. Because in that game, if you were a citizen, you were potentially somebody who could rebuild for that game did not properly represent the leave the people alone aspect. Rule 5 is withdraw if your objectives are unobtainable. Given the hawkish disposition of leaders and soldiers, there is real courage issuing the instruction of leaving a space if the objectives set out cannot be obtained. But of course, there are other like cultural norms, as I've mentioned in militaries about honor and dishonor and obedience and fighting. There was a time when the the proper way to fight was to stand in lines and have the commander say, ready, aim, fire. And then one individual would take a volley, then the other individual would take a volley, and they would go back and forth a few times, and then one would decide to declare the charge. But of course, how that fits into this world will depend on quite a few things. And that is pretty much gonna wrap up my talk about social etiquette and cultural norms. Some dry stuff there, but hey, listen, we get to the nitty gritty here on the stream. We talk about the little things. We talk about the things that that spice up our worlds, that give extra detail to the canvas that is the creation process. I am presently going to take a very short break, and then when I come back, I'm going to pop open Reddit. We're going to look at r-worldbuilding, and we're going to take a look at some of those questions. We're going to do some brainstorming live on the stream, but I'm going to give myself, let's say, 5 minutes, and I will be right back, my friends. In the meantime, please enjoy this fantastic stream break video of spider plants and a lone cat named Sylvester. We'll be right back. And we're going to come right back here. Hello. We are back. Thank you very much for sticking around. And before we go forward, I'll do my typical plug. Hey, by the way, we got to do a little bit of a... I got to do a little bit of a additional plug here if I got the music still back up here. Where is it? Oh, no. Here it is. So, the Bears are back in town, if you hadn't figured it out. I run a monthly one-shot for Patreon subscribers. And every month is going to be a different one-shot. For the month of May, it is going to be Honey Heist. If you've never played Honey Heist before, it is a fantastic game. Everybody plays a bear, and they go on a heist of a honey convention, specifically HoneyCon 2022. Let's make the magic happen. And it's a really fun time. It is a lot of improv. It is a one-sheet tabletop game. So there's not a whole lot of rules. It pretty much is up to your imagination. But you only have two stats. One is in criminal and the other is in bear. And you do not want to be too far on the criminal side, and neither do you want to be too far on the bear side. Because if you max out in bear, you become feral, and you are detained. Otherwise, if you max out in criminal, you become a criminal mastermind and you betray everybody. But if you can balance between these two skills and work your way to gain as much of a lead towards the final prize of the heist, then you may be victorious. So if you are somebody who likes playing in different one-shots and wants the opportunity to play in this one-shot, you could certainly reach out to me either on Twitch or on Discord. Otherwise, first preference goes to those who are patrons. If you are wondering where you can become a patron, that's going to be on Patreon. Down in the doobly-doo, you will find a link, and that link has a particular Patreon page. That Patreon page has a number of different tiers. If you're somebody who just likes supporting things for the sake of supporting things, there's a $1 tier for that. Otherwise, if you want to get some benefits back, there's 3, there's 5, there's 10. So feel free to check out the Patreon, decide if any of those tiers fit what you are looking to get out of myself as a creator. There's stuff like maps that I've created for tabletop role-playing on the Patreon. There are certain VODs that I keep around for the long term for those who want to peek in on them. There's of course the one-shots that I run, of which patrons get first pick of participating, and the rest is decided basically somewhere between a first come first serve and a raffle, depending upon the amount of interest. So feel free to check it out. Feel free to subscribe. You will also get shout outs here on the stream. Presently, the patrons that are on my fancy shout out list are individuals such as The Eldest Barry, Sean Sparrow, Christopher Massey, Swift Ninja, and Samael Leopold Sullivan. Each of these individuals, fancy 100% A-rated individuals who have decided to provide support to this stream, to the website, and to the stuff that I do. And once again, thank you very much. That was weird. Anyways, we're gonna move on. Final thing I want to show you, of course, is that I do have a website. It's called chaoticandwriter.com. Feel free to check it out. There are some articles. I periodically post new articles and new resources, random name generators if you like those. Feel free to survey the website. And let me know if there's anything in particular that you want to see as content as I continue to write up and distribute some brainstorms from the mind of yours truly and the things he likes to research. Anyhow, bring it in. Thank you very much, Phoenix V. It's good to be back. At present, what I'm hoping to do, this is something that I haven't done on my stream. I gotta be frank. I gotta switch the tone of this a little bit more, because I think I've been running this playlist. It's a fantastic playlist with all sorts of fantastic music. But the thing is that I need my stream to be a little bit more hype than that. So I think for next time, I'm gonna have a curated playlist that is gonna be of higher caliber, higher energy. But for the time being, enjoy the lovely music that I have playing in the background as we take our own personal deep dive into the Reddit Worldbuilding subreddit. And we take a look at some of these questions that have popped up, and we kind of do a little bit of live brainstorming on some of this content. Oh boy, we love that content, don't we? So let me make sure that I can get the proper... let's see, screen capture, is that it? Almost, we are almost there. I just need to make sure that the applicable screen capture boom. There we go. Make things a little larger so that we can all see what's being talked about. So, our world building is a fantastic location for all sorts of monumental brainstorms on the creation of settings, the creation of races, of classes, of various different concepts within the fantasy and science fiction space. And taking a dive into some of the questions that may pop up, or some of the thought process that pop up, should give us some stuff to talk about, stuff to really dig deep. Now, the thing is that there are questions, there are prompts, and here's a question I feel like I want to answer right off the bat here. There is this question: are modern fortresses obsolete? In the context of the question, this individual says, I've been wondering if modern weaponry, vehicles, and technology make oversized fortresses or other bunker-like defenses, such as the Atlantic Wall, or that one wall of French fortresses I can't remember the name of, useless but not cost-effective. Star forts already have in the past been used to very effectively defend against cannons and muskets. And I believe we can have a similar effectiveness with modern concrete and steel. Are our anti-air defenses advanced enough to properly protect a hypothetical modern fortress from missiles, motors, jets, and drones? Can artillery be defended from, or can that be only be endured through attrition? Are modern firearms too accurate for defenders to be defended by predictable battlements? Are forts too weak to withstand bombardment? Lots of questions going on here. We talked a little bit about this, but in a previous stream, as a matter of fact, and that point of discussion had to do with the evolution of castles. Now, it mentioned star forts, and star forts were a very interesting evolution of the castle, because when you're thinking of castles, it started as a way to protect the keep, but then to also support a small group of retainers or peasants that would be able to serve as a lord. But of course, as war became a little bit more complex, there was the creation of stone walls, and then of course concentric castles with multiple walls, with towered corners, which would view over the wall surrounding the outside of it. And then of course, over time, there were star forts. Now, the interesting thing about star forts is that they utilized stone and they utilized earth. Essentially, in order to prevent walls from just caving in, they built the walls along mounds of earth so that if like cannons struck into them, they would just splat and not break through the wall. And the star forts were shaped in a very particular way to allow for cannon placement that allowed for, you know, greater range of protection of the center. They were also just generally, it provided a larger buffer. And ultimately, when you think about it, star forts became, they were places where you would actually put the artillery. So I guess the question is, with modern weaponry, supersized fortresses, do they make sense? Well, if you're talking modern, a lot of modern warfare is mobile. It's stuff that is highly mobile, that explores not just 2 dimensions, but 3 dimensions. You're talking about air superiority and stuff like that. And the thing is that the whole point of having a fort is to defend a geographical region, a very specific geographical region. Now, I do sort of think that modern fortresses are just they're not nearly as up to snuff anymore because of these technological advancements. But some of the individuals here mention things like, a fortress like you're describing isn't really feasible. If you're wanting a more subterranean bunker complex or build to the mountain these days, you could maybe. Modern artillery as such will annihilate a traditional fortress. And it absolutely will. This individual says, complicated topic, far from expert, combine armed tactics with emphasize mobile warfare. Yeah, mobile. Air power and the ability to threaten things the fortress is supposed to protect anyways makes the fortress useless. Now, if it was like a flying fortress, that would, and it had full degree of coverage, that would be a different thing. Now, you would see flying fortresses, you're talking basically like flying cities, like clockwork skies. So really the only 2 ways that a modern fortress could really exist is either it's got to be subterranean, which makes it not a fortress necessarily, or you take the sci-fi route and it's a flying fortress, and not like a flying fortress battleship. You're talking about a flying fortress, literal flying fortress with 360 degree spherical coverage of defense, long range. And instead of thinking of a geographic region as an area of land, you have to think of it as an area of volume. Anyway, there's my take on that question. Let's take a look at another question or prompt here. What are some basic things I should outline for my civilization?
Making a new civilization. I currently have this as my outline. History, the beginning, early days, first war. Religion, beliefs, practices, other.
What I'm looking at right now, this is a skeleton. This isn't really a
technology, weaponry, transportation, farming, utility.
This person is missing society and political and the political nuances of that society. Social customs, like we just talked about. We're missing let's see here, history, religion. We're missing diplomacy. We're missing how that civilization interacts with other civilizations. What is its relationship to its neighbors? What is its relationship to people who are not its neighbors? There's not enough detail to really work with here. But this person answer is government, economy. Okay, that's a great one. The jobs that people have, what do they import, export? What are their trading routes? Logistics, stuff like how your cities are designed, urban planning. How does your civilization take care of waste? Moving things around, that's essentially what logistics is. And then we have arts and culture. How do people dress? What is their cuisine like? Festivities, rituals, ceremonies, and importance. Kind of goes back to that culture wheel. Yeah, let's take a look at another question here. Horned species in combat. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Despite the imagery of Vikings with horned helmets being a common trope, in real life, Old Norse warriors did not wear horns of any kinds on their helmets, as having something the enemy could easily grab and break your neck would prove a liability in combat. If there was a sapient species that looked like minotaurs with large cattle or ram horns, would having their horns grabbed and getting their neck broken while fighting be a huge problem? Would they need to wear armor or counteract it, or would having really thick necks counteracting it? So I would imagine that this race probably would have been fought or hunted by humanity in such a way that the same way that humanity tends to fight and hunt other creatures with such things, antlers and horns. Yeah, they could be a problem. The counteracting part of that is these minotaurs would have to be quite strong. Breaking one's neck should not be an easy feat. Having their horns grabbed and getting their neck broken while fighting. I imagine to a certain point, horns would be a ceremonious thing. They would be a sign of status. And that culture of minotaur-like creatures would probably shave the horns off of its grunts, as it could be a liability. But those in higher status would probably be allowed to keep their horns, because they are not at the forefront of battle. Yeah, those are some thoughts that I have about that. Strong necks would probably be a pretty important characteristic. The risk is exaggerated. Horns would be a liability in hand-to-hand combat. But taking advantage of that requires both of the attacker's hands, a very dangerous thing to do if the defender is armed. It would be an act of desperation to try to break somebody's neck using their helmet. Well, Vikings probably didn't use horned helmets. Warriors from other cultures sometimes did. We have most species have fight with horns do have thick enough necks and shoulders to handle the stress.
So snap spines would probably wouldn't be an issue. Against a strong enough opponent, it probably still could be a disadvantage. There's some good points there. But I'm thinking more in the terms of like somebody with a chain or a bunch of people with ropes pulling a Minotaur down. You could get an entire group of people trying to pull one down. If you're talking about one-on-one combat, oh boy. I would still think if against a Minotaur, that's a big boy to fight. They would probably break your neck far before you would break their neck. Horns are used for fighting, and those that use them are often able to stand the strain of slamming into something. What are my thoughts? What do I think? I'm just say I can just imagine horns being a perfect target for riders with rope or chains. Or individuals who are looking to topple such a large creature. I would say the creature's strength would be key. As a large enough and strong enough creature would surely break its opponent's neck before theirs would. That would is an imbalance out the gate. By default, strong necks, not easily broken, would be ideal. All right, that's my comment. See, I'm contributing. Okay, so let's take a look at another question here. If the entire planet is frozen except for a thin area around the equator, how would people make their first tools? Phoenix V says the Hulk type of neck. Yeah, literally just bulbous, literally inflated puffs of muscle. Or maybe Rock's neck. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking of in that case. So this is an interesting question, though. Entire planet frozen, except for a thin area around the equator, which means access to... Well, if it's frozen, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's no access to stone and no access to caves, because frozen doesn't necessarily mean snowy. How would people make their first tools? Well, the tools would be prioritized to make fire. But of course, in order to make fire, you need something that you can light on fire. If it is a completely frozen planet, most things are probably dead. Unless you have flora, which manages to survive super cold temperatures. But what about its ability to withstand heat. So Phoenix V says, let it go. Let it go. Not that kind of frozen. Yeah, you're right. The planet has very little land overall. It's been pushed down by all the ice. So there is ice covering everything. And just a fraction of it is exposed. Whatever was lucky enough to be at the equator. How would people start making tools? What if all the exposed land are no stone? Very little fit. Well, for one, if there was no stone, and if it was frozen enough, you would essentially be gathering lots and lots of icicle stalagmites and using those as tools, if possible. They'd be very temporary tools, but you could essentially... Oh! Thought process here. So... peat, not P-E, peat, P-E-A-T, or P-A-E-T. It's the idea that you can create a temporary but very strong, and it would actually last for a while. If you were in a frozen wasteland, you can create blocks of peat, which are essentially, you take straw and grass and stuff like that, fibrous stuff, and you mix it in with frozen material. That is, you mix it in with water, and you have that freeze, because that is a much more condensed and much stronger material. Now, could you make tools out of it? You would probably be, you know, carrying large, you know, you could make shelter out of it for sure. Like igloos are still going to be a thing. You can make shelter, but and you're going to have plenty of water because you're going to be able to melt ice. But in terms of like food, in terms of agriculture, well, you need seeds. You need something to grow. Otherwise, you're just dead. Otherwise, you are hunting down fauna. But the tools would have to be bone, the bone of fauna. You would most likely have, yeah. And then if you didn't have grass, you could just use the fur and the remains of fauna to create blood peat. I'm going to share that with this group. I think that's really cool, actually. Here's an idea. Since ice caps cover most of the planet, the part that isn't permanently frozen is still going to be below freezing most of the year. Perhaps the very first tools could be made by pouring a mixture of water and thin fibrous material like animal fur into a mold and allowing it to freeze. Yep, I just said that. The mold could be made by digging a hole in the dirt in the shape of the tool you want and lining the walls of the mold with leaves to prevent the water from seeping into the soil. The addition of animal fur in the water is to increase the structural integrity of the ice and prevent it from breaking easily. Yep, that's exactly same way as normal. Get rocks or bones and chip them until they're usually sharp. For the record, dirt is just a mixture of small bits of stone, potentially cemented together with clay. That is accurate. You could still make stuff out of clay. Frankly, if there was ice covering everything, the dirt would be much more compact. Okay, so I think I've sufficiently answered that question. I don't need to post it because it seems like they posted a lot of the same ideas. Question. What would happen if no animal species ever went extinct? Okay. This one's a little bit of a headache, huh? There's only two people in this one, but I may as well check it out. I know this is a super heavy question. I'm toying around with this, making a story set in a world where dinosaurs and other extinct animals live alongside humans. Yeah. My idea started as a cool drawing of a guy riding a Carnotaurus, and then just spiraled from there. Would the dawn of man ever happen if there were still dinosaurs? How could the Earth provide enough resources for this? What about the other species of humans, such as Homo habilis or Homo floresiensis? I don't know how to pronounce that. To be clear, I know this wouldn't be possible. I want there to be a magical justification as to why no animal can go extinct. Okay. If we're literally thinking that no animal can go extinct, either there is a source that is like a spawn point. It's like a spawn point that keeps breeding the animal forever and ever, and they can never go extinct, literally. Or there is some sort of authority that is maintaining the diversity on this planet, preventing one animal from ever going extinct or another. Now the question is, what about other species of humans, such as, well, listen, they would still be around. Therefore, no extinction would... Okay, so this person says no extinction would probably also mean no evolution. Or no very fast, diverse, overpopulated world with its... Or very fast, a diverse, overpopulated world with its own problems. No evolution would mean no modern birds, no bigger mammals, because dinosaurs would be the ultimate predators. Therefore, no humans. No modern sea creatures, plants, etc. The opposite would likely result in a very small species size for every species that is not the fittest, to put it in Darwin's words, and better adapted species taking over, crowding out the others. And when we don't know how species would have evolved if the extinction event never happened, or if there would be no extinction of species as a whole. No dinosaurs were not leading in size during the Jurassic. They only became big after the end of the Jurassic extinction. I see. I'm definitely seeing that there's this trend of growing larger and larger beings over millions and millions of years. I bet you that if you gave humankind a million years, we would evolve in ways that are unprecedented. Of course, we might become the size of dinosaurs. If we continued to have stable food, we would grow to be bigger and bigger. That is my observation. Anyways, let's see. Let's look at another question here. Okay, so I'm starting a new world and I'd like an opinion on some choices how the universe began. Let's do a different one. Question: how would modern world powers interact with a newly emergent nation? Context. How would you call mountain formations like these? How do you find your starting point? Any ideas for tracking funders' project novel? I'm gonna answer all of these in brief, I think. The first one was... Okay, so I'm starting a new world, like opinions, some choices for how the universe began. There's the Big Bang. There is perhaps an eternal framework. Perhaps the universe never began. It's eternal, and you were talking about cycles. Perhaps nobody knows how the universe began, and it is actually eternal, and that there's just no history of any civilization beyond a certain point. Then, of course, the other questions that I saw were, how would modern world powers interact with a newly emergent nation? It really all depends upon how that newly emergent nation vibes with the 4D poker game of foreign policy. If a newly emergent nation had valuable resources, it would make some friends and enemies pretty quick. If it was powerful enough, it would likely it would engage in trade with other powers. If it was not very powerful, it would be a puppet of a larger power very quickly. And if it was like a brand new nation that was more powerful than any of the other nations, it would cause its own Cold War, as all the other nations would immediately begin enacting their foreign policy against it. How do you call mountain formations like these? I don't know mountain formations. How do you find a starting point for world building? So, allow me, I'm going to bring it back to the Let's Chatting screen. How does one find a starting point when it comes to world building? This is a very, very broad question, but it is a very simple answer. And that answer is pretty much, you have to start somewhere. There is no right way to start with world building. I typically think of world building in four different aspects. One is small to large. That is to say, focus on a small geographic area, location, begin to flesh it out how you feel it needs to be fleshed out, and then broaden the scope from there. Kind of zoom out and come up with the places around it and the places around that. That is a method that would be useful, particularly, if you were somebody who was trying to create a tabletop role-playing game, and you wanted to give your characters a small area to start with and then broaden it out from there. You could do the large to small method, which is you come up with the world, you come up with the continents, and then you start putting in pieces. Large to small could also mean large events to small events. So coming up with the big rocks of what happened in the timeline. What is the big creation story? What is the big war that happened? What is the big cataclysm? What is the big union of nations that created this supernation, that created this empire? There's that aspect of it as well. A third way to look at it would be by way of considering character arcs, but more specifically considering a story. Let's say you're writing a novel. You want to build out the settings that are going to be necessary for that story. So if there is a small village that the protagonist is from, you begin by building out that small village, and you determine who lives in that small village, what establishments there are. You create a general sense of what the society is like, what the cultural norms are, and the etiquette is. You then place the character in that spot, in that setting, and then you kind of follow along the journey of where you intend to bring that character, and then you start building out those spaces. The fourth way is similar to the third way, except it is very specifically not by your point of view as a writer or world builder, but from the point of view of the character themselves. That is to say, if you're really trying to deep dive into
the mind of the character, the main character of whatever story it is, or the players of whatever story it is. You're thinking from not a position of what do I want to put around them, but what do I want to have them experience? What do I want the characters to experience from the beginning? What do I want them to interact with in the beginning? And you create a setting starting from the microscopic point of where you want to, what direction you want to lead them in. Very similar to story, except you're taking point of view much closer into context. You're focusing much more about the look of things, the sensation of things, the color of things, the atmosphere of things, because you are mentally putting yourself in the shoes of NPCs. You're mentally putting yourself in the shoes of the character, and ultimately you are creating an experience, not just a setting. So those are the four methods that I typically recommend in order to create that sort of paradigm in a setting or a game or a novel or whatever it is that you wish to create. There is no wrong answer to starting point. There's only whatever point you wish to start with, whatever makes sense the most for whatever it is you're trying to create. Whatever it is in your heart of hearts to create, that is your starting point. I might make that into a VOD. Anyhow. Let's see. Any idea for attracting funders for a novel project? Maybe, but I'm not going to talk about that. Need help with superheroes, drawbacks, weaknesses, and maybe finding plot holes. Yeah, I feel like I'm reaching the point where I'm sort of questioned and answered out right now. So, in which case, we had a good solid couple of hours sort of talking about different topics, going through some of these questions. Now, one thing I was going to target or pinpoint was having a bit of discussion about the setting. I'm going to do this very briefly. So we, of course, that is to say the fantastic individuals who are involved with Project Aurora, those specifically in the mini project, are engaging in a collaboration. And the setting for that has already been established. It is green tides and clockwork skies. The aspect of it is that nature has taken back the surface. The Fae have kicked humanoid civilization off the surface, and out of its continued existence, out of its survival, but also out of its thriving, humanoids have taken to the skies in sky cities. There is a ongoing contention between civilization and the Fae on the surface, and there is continuous war, continuous battle happening. There are humanoid settlements on the surface that still exist. They're sort of backwater and dangerous places. And I imagine that there are all sorts of points of interest across the surface, which are prime adventuring opportunities. And one thing that I have floated quite heavily is the idea that there have been failed Sky City attempts or prototypes that have essentially crashed, and that there is a massive overgrown scrapyard, which I think would be a fantastic fantastic location to run to run a one shot. But anyways, we've created this setting, and all of the dungeon masters involved are going to be running one shots. And then we have the lore masters that are sort of building out
all of the key areas of the setting lore and the story and things of that nature. My goal initially was to go and chat with was to go and chat with lore masters, but we actually have a very specific and pre-scheduled meeting for that. That is going to be this Sunday. It's going to be a roundtable discussion with 4 of the Project Aurora lore masters, Max Fish and myself. 6 people talking about the building of the lore of Green Tides and Clockwork Skies. And it is going to be an exciting opportunity for us to really dig deep and maybe get some brainstorming in and do some world building. As it stands, there is a lot of submission in terms of the fantasy races that will be implemented. Some of the typical ones, but then some brand new world built or homebrewed ones. And on top of that, there is also there are also the concept of elemental domains. No gods. Elemental domains are essentially the powers that be. And each of the domains has a patron. Some of the art and lore is predetermined here, but you know what? I think it would be best to have that discussion on Sunday. So if you are at all interested in participating in that, I would like to invite you formally to a Sunday stream that is going to take place at 5 p.m. Central this Sunday. It is once again going to be a roundtable discussion with 4 of the Project Aurora lore masters. Max Fish, who is the lore master lead, and myself, who is the dungeon master lead of Project Aurora. And once again, if Project Aurora is a fantastic open world setting. It's a living universe with many campaigns, many DMs, many more players, and one world, one universe where this all takes place in. Different campaigns can interact with each other. Things that happen in one can affect another. We're essentially creating a brand new setting with the mini project in tow. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be really great. This will be a prime opportunity actually for me to wind things down. Usually, typically. So yeah, 6 p.m. Eastern for you, Phoenix. Absolutely. So be sure to pop in for that. It's gonna be some good chat, good discussion. Some upcoming streams that you can look out for. Tales of Siglasia, session 22. That is to say, season 3. That's just total 22. Season 3, episode 3, or whatever. Is going to start tomorrow at 6:30 Eastern, 5:30 Central. And some of the heat is going to be turned up in that game. So stay tuned for that. On top of that, on Friday, there is a very, very special stream that's happening in partnership with a number of content creators, and it is going to be hosted by Be Never Ending. Specifically, that's not what I wanted to do. It's going to be hosted by Be Never Ending. That is to say, trying to get his name again. What was it? Let's see. Jamie Van Doren, that's what it is. So Jamie Van Doren is the proprietor and the streamer behind Be Neverending / Neverending. And he is hosting, that is to say, they are hosting an interview with yours truly, and an interview with, I believe, Sensei Suplex as well. That is going to be co-streamed with everybody, and it will be a fantastic opportunity for us to talk Dungeons and Dragons, specifically the prospect of getting more people into the art of dungeon mastering, because there's an abundance of players out there, but there's a lack of dungeon masters. And so talking about how we got into dungeon mastering originally, talking about our experiences, what we recommend, how do we empower some of these players to get into the process of running their own games. So that's going to take place on Friday. That is going to be 4 p.m. Pacific time and 7 p.m. Eastern time. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be a fantastic opportunity, and I'm very excited to be part of that. And aside from that, once again, oh yes, well, the Bears were back in town, but now that's my website. You should go down in the doobly-doo and click and check out my website, because it's quite cool. But on top of that, I do also have a Patreon. You are a patron. I have a Patreon. The Patreon is to support the stream, is to support the website, but as a general way of giving back to your favorite creators, Patreons are quite useful for that purpose, and there are certain benefits that you will be provided for becoming a patron. So please consider, once again, going down to the doobly-doo, clicking on that Patreon link, and checking out what tiers are available. If you just want to support for the sake of supporting, you have that power. There is a $1 tier that doesn't necessarily give anything back. It's just a $1 tier. But of course, there are benefits for $3 and up. So feel free to check those out as you are able to. And then finally, once again, for the month of May, at some point in the month of May, and I will have details soon coming, I will be running Honey Heist, which is a fantastic one-page tabletop role-playing game that is comprised of bears, honey, and mischief. So if you're interested, once again, feel free to support the stream. Go down and add me on Twitter. Check me out on Twitch, which is where I'm at. So also remember to do the diligent thing and check out the Patreon. But that actually wasn't the one I think I was trying to trigger. Oh, this is what it is. Feel free to hit that follow button if you haven't already. I sincerely appreciate it. Once I hit 300, I am going to be hosting another long stream. Could be 12 hours, could be 24 hours. It might end up being 24 hours this time. It really depends upon what my schedule allows. But it is going to be a celebration and a thank you to everybody who has supported this stream. I want to have the opportunity to give back. So please help me reach this milestone, and we will have a very good fun time in the near future. So I'm going to wrap things up. I want to say it has been a pleasure and a privilege, and I, Chaotic Narrator, will see y'all in the next episode. And y'all keep world building. Y'all keep enjoying the art of crafting and creating, and I will be there to help you along the way. Thank you very much. Y'all have a fantastic evening.